Alright, in a Classic Games Revisited first, we are reviewing Smurf Rescue in Gargamel's Castle, a game we previously reviewed for the ColecoVision system, but this time we're reviewing it for the Atari 2600, so we can compare and contrast, if you will. On with the review. Alright, the first thing I'll notice is that in the Atari version, they actually played the theme song from the Smurfs cartoon in the beginning of the game when you start the game up. This song is not included in the ColecoVision version. The background music that actually plays in this version is the same background music that plays in the Coleco version, but the Coleco version omits the Smurf theme song, which is, I think, a very curious omission, because the ColecoVision system was actually more powerful and could definitely handle something like the Smurf theme song music. Now you'll notice also on this final stage, where you rescue Smurfette, instead of jumping on top of a skull, which you then in turn jump on top of a table from the skull, you jump on a couple of stools and the back of a chair before you get to Smurfette. And I think that's probably because of the graphical limitations of the Atari. In this version, there's a nice heart that appears when you rescue Smurfette. I don't believe that heart appears in the Coleco version. But yeah, the beautifully rendered skull is absent, and probably because it just didn't look much like a skull when they actually tried to render it. You can see our friend the Black Raven is back. And there's an interesting graphical glitch there. You can see if you walk back when the raven appears, or hawk, or whatever it is, that disappears and a fence appears. We have a snake, which is not in the Coleco version. And the river you have to jump over is not in the ColecoVision version either. So both these parts of the stage are new for the Atari version. And the floating cloud in the background of that last stage was also not in the Coleco version. So right now, there are a lot of things that are in the Atari version that are not in the Coleco, and that surprised me greatly. The overall graphics of the Atari version are obviously worse, but they did work well with the Atari limitations. I was very impressed. The sound effects bothered me a bit, though, with that snake. It sounded like a train. Now let's talk about gameplay. In Smurf, like the ColecoVision version, the button does nothing. You just use the joystick. But I felt that the gameplay control was actually smoother and more responsive on the Atari version. Another surprise for me, because we all know that the ColecoVision version is pretty much pure shit. And I pretty much thought the Atari version was even a bigger pile of shit. But honestly, I was wrong. I mean, the Atari version, I felt, was superior to the ColecoVision version. And that's a pretty rare feat. Typically, when a game is released on both platforms like that, or all three platforms at the time, the Intellivision, Atari, and ColecoVision, the Atari was usually the inferior version. And while that can be said for the case here graphically, everything else being equal, I think it's a better playing game on the Atari. Go figure. So yeah, Smurf Rescue in Gargamel's Castle on the ColecoVision. Yeah, almost unplayable. On the Atari 2600, a very playable game, very enjoyable. I definitely recommend this one, though I wouldn't really recommend the Coleco. I'm Dommy from Classic Games Revisited. Until next time. Oh, and I forgot to mention, still look out for the deadly nothing, like hills or grass, what have you. Everything's deadly in Smurf.